Mao Zedong's wife was going mad. She was called Jiang Qing. She lived alone, surrounded by pet monkeys and nurses who she was convinced were conspiring against her. Those in charge of the revolution in China had completely marginalized her. She was too dangerous, they thought, to be allowed anywhere near her husband or power. They had even sent her to Moscow to be locked in a sanatorium with real and imagined illnesses. But now, Jiang Qing's husband was facing disaster. The revolution had led to horror. 30 million people had died from starvation in the past 3 years. The other leaders wanted to get rid of him, and suddenly he called for her. Jiang Qing was an extraordinary person. She believed in nothing except the power of her will to shape reality. She had begun as an actor in films in Shanghai in the 1930s. The other actors looked down at her for her driving ambition.
She liked to be on the top, always. She's a very ambitious woman, and she liked to be a top, and she plays with all the directors, cameramans, make them pay attention, you see, and interest in her, so she can have better part of the film. She married a quite famous writer called Tang Na, and after marriage, she doesn't feel very satisfied about her husband, because her husband is not the very, very strong man, and she left him, and he jumped to the river, and then the water was very cold, so he jumped up again, you see. So,
you mean he tried to commit suicide?
Yes, he's trying to commit suicide.
After the suicide attempt, Jiang Qing wrote a long letter to her husband. It said she was leaving him and also explained why with an extraordinary openness. There were powerful forces inside her, she said, that kept driving her towards fame and power. And it was only those forces that held her together psychologically. Nothing must hold them back. It ended. What matters is that you remember me as a woman who never caves in before anyone, and who will never bear to be treated as inferior to men. But Jiang Qing failed to become a star. The man who ran the studio scorned her ambition. Her most famous part was as a supporting actor in a film called Bloodshed on Wolf Mountain. The star of the film was called Li Lily. Jiang Qing was convinced that Li was trying to upstage her all the time, and she became the focus of all Jiang Qing's anger over her treatment by the Shanghai establishment. Bitter and disillusioned, Jiang Qing left Shanghai and traveled to join the communist resistance on a remote mountain in Yunnan. The camp was an intense, exciting place, and many of the young revolutionaries had affairs. Sex was called undisciplined guerrilla warfare. But when Jiang Qing started an affair with the leader Mao Zedong, that was different. She was scorned by the other revolutionaries as a social climbing upstart. Then it got worse. Mao announced that he was going to divorce his wife and marry Jiang Qing. The other communist leaders were horrified. They saw Jiang Qing as a dangerous, destructive force because she was driven by a fierce, radical individualism that threatened their collective dream. In the communist structure, everyone was part of a unit. She insisted, I am a unit of one. No one could work out what to do. They even went to Joseph Stalin in Moscow for his advice. He said let them marry, but Jiang Qing must sign a document promising to refrain from political activity for 30 years. She signed, but she was furious with the men who now controlled her. They even tracked down and destroyed copies of her old films because they didn't fit with the image of Mao's wife. Her fury grew. Jiang Qing wanted power on her own behalf as an individual, and she wanted revenge. 20 years later, in 1959, Mao was facing disaster and he was calling for her.
Part 2 is coming very, very soon, and you don't want to